think we do right now is probably going to be not only inadequate, but it's probably going to be derogatory or marginalizing, or we'll find there was something wrong in our philosophies and kind of distorted a little bit.
For
History's
sure.
not always kind.
Or that a lot of people were hurt by the policies or
Absolutely.
practices, which was the very thing that was like most like interesting and upsetting about those utopias, was that they become sort of so rigid around what their ideas
Yes.
of like a perfect community looked like, that they didn't allow for anything to sort of get out of that, and then it became dangerous.
Absolutely.
And they started oppressing people, obviously.
That seems to always be the course, right? You know, you think about the Pilgrims coming to America for the story we're told, and we believe we're searching for religious freedom. But really, what they wanted to do was to be able to enforce their strict religious ideology on people. So it starts off with the quest for freedom, but a few decades later, you're oppressing people. You've already had people in slavery, and you think it's okay. All of these types of things where you started off just trying to find religious freedom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you mentioned that talking about that experimental community, how it went from like feminism to like hardcore egalitarianism. Just like a pendulum swing. And we seem to be like that as people. We like those extreme pendulum swings. We can never find the middle of the road.
Well, when it wasn't, sort of working as they expected, because it's not going to stay perfect. And they tried to stay really isolated. There was this process to let other people in, They were really cut off. But when it was like started to fall apart, they thought, oh, we have to sort of overcorrect, And then someone else took over. I don't remember what his name was, but...
And that always seems to be the idea, right? When things are going awry, we just need to clamp down. Tighten the grip on everything.
Yeah.
And I like to always think of it, the more we tighten our grip on things, the more slips through our fingers and stuff.
It's that whole sort of like progressive, conservative like ideas that there's a lot of people who are trying to really hold on to the way things are and protect that. And then this other group of people are trying to push things in another direction. And it's like those two things together, democracy, is sort of necessary. Like you need them both in order to... Absolutely. I mean, you can't change too fast because things really do fall apart.
Well, I think you have to have diversity. When everybody thinks the same way, I think we all agree nowadays that groupthink is a bad thing. When you get everybody in the room repeating the same ideas and the same concepts and the same criticisms, it's very easy to get stuck in your ideology, but... and either regardless of which side of that spectrum you end up on, conservatism or liberalism, they all think they're doing the right thing.
Of course,
the other people are utterly evil.
Yeah. Well, that's the dark side of it. I mean, I do think there are probably communities, and maybe ours could be that, Southern Illinois is like that sometimes. There are lots of people who are either progressive or conservative that can work really well together, And I think it's like, this is the great way to talk about the recovery community or our approach to like substance use disorder, is that there are so many people that think like being punitive about people with addiction is like really the right way to kind of make their community safe and take care of everyone. And then you have us over here on the other side who are like, this is a situation that treatment is really the only right thing to do. Like we have to stop punishing people. And I think sometimes I forget this because I'm pretty progressive, I guess, and that I want to sort of convince the people in my town that like you have to treat people struggling with addiction with dignity, and like you're not going to be able to sort of punish someone into changing their behavior, but they're very scared of that. They think it's going to be bedlam, like total chaos. People will be running through the streets doing drugs or whatever they're imagining. But I have to sort of like calibrate the way I talk to people because it's scary, and they're used to that, It's like you can't change it too fast. It's just not going to work.
Well, what's the the old metaphor about the frog in the pot of boiling water?
Yes,
as the temperature rises, the frog doesn't recognize it. It tries to jump out of the water.
That's a good point.
One of the things that as I was getting early started into all this a few years ago, it was very different than what I'd been doing in the past as a coal miner. And it's easy coming into this work, especially advocacy. You see that I felt like there was a difference between people who were advocates and people who were activists, and in some circles you see a lot of activism, and there's a need for both people. But I've always thought of activists as the people that stand outside the glass house and throw rocks at the
I
house,
see.
trying to tear the house down.
Yeah, yeah.
But an advocate tries to go inside the house and learns how to work inside the house and
Interesting.
change things from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And we absolutely need both people.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to see myself as being an activist, especially in such a largely conservative area. It's a touchy subject around here because, like you say, people are afraid. The bad thing about conservatism is that you try to protect those traditions, but sometimes those traditions have some problems at their core that need to be changed. You can't be afraid of change.
Yeah. Well, when it works for you, like the system is working in your favor and serves your needs, it's very hard to sort of step outside of yourself and think about all the people who it's not serving,
Absolutely.
and it might be even harming them,
Absolutely. And that was something along that lines was a revelation, probably like a lot of people that I reached during all the George Floyd riots. Especially coming from growing up in the justice system, coming from some of the issues. I've been homeless. I've experienced that punitive side of the law. From my perspective, I didn't feel like my skin color made a difference in that. So for a lot of my thinking, as a lot of the George Floyd stuff is building up, I'm like, I have these experiences and I haven't experienced what you guys experienced. So, you guys are wrong. You guys are overreacting, this and that. But what I had to realize was that not everybody has shared my experience. And that what they experienced, even though they might be similar, might have been very different. And to where they felt like that their voices need to be heard at that moment about those issues. And that it was just my time to just shut up and listen and let people have their voice rather than arguing with them. Because I felt justified because of my past experiences that I could challenge those thinkings. But I had to begin to see where my experience was different. And I really didn't have a right to, I just needed to give people space to speak their opinions and share what they were going through.
I guess that when you first said there's a difference between being an activist and an advocate, I wasn't sure what you're talking about, but I feel like that's a perfect example because I feel like an advocate, for equal rights and to find some way to dismantle the, system of white supremacy.
Sure.
But there are people like throwing bricks through, convenience store windows. And at first, like a lot of people, I was like, I have no idea how that is going to help anything. Yeah. But when you feel totally helpless and totally powerless in your community, that probably makes a lot of sense, all those places that you're throwing bricks through the window or setting on fire represent the institutions that are oppressing you or against you or don't serve you in your own community, And I can only try and guess what it's like because we're not going to know, but...
It's hard, even though we experience a lot of poverty in Southern Illinois. And it makes us feel like we have good base to stand on in some of those discussions because even as white people in Southern Illinois, we experience some very similar things. But when you experience hopelessness and despair on the level of hundreds of thousands of people in small neighborhoods crammed on top of each other, it is a very explosive situation. And when people don't feel like they have a voice, when people, and sometimes that's all it is just wanting to have a voice. It's not about even changing any systems. It's just speaking out, being able to have that voice. When people feel like they don't have it, they explode, and the only way that how, and that typically ends up being in riots and destructive vandalism, that type of stuff. We are operating a warming center right now. People complain about the homeless population, people with mental challenges in those situations because they seem ungrateful sometimes. And we were talking about that earlier because we have experienced backlash from the people who are coming into our warming center at night if they don't have, what they view as adequate food or this or that. And trying to work with our staff to work through how we have to provide those things. Because even though to us it seems like they're being ungrateful, to them in their experience, they don't have anything else. Their life is filled with this hopelessness and this despair. And when they think they're going to get a hot meal and they come in and it's a bowl of ramen noodles, it's very disappointing.
Oh, wow.
And raging, and just how we need to do better with things. Some things are unavoidable, you can't help. But we could still intentionally try to do things better to make sure we provide dignified services, not just
Yeah.
feel like, well, at least we're doing something. We have to avoid that attitude.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot when we're like a service provider for people who are like, marginalized or don't have any resources, that we expect like this like perfect sort of client
Thank you, sir.
who's so grateful. Yeah. And is like compliant and does all the right things. Like we've had so much trouble like finding emergency housing for people because a lot of the sort of emergency housing options in our area, they have certain expectations of the kind of people that are going to be able to stay there. And I think those guidelines are in place to kind of protect everybody, but it means that a lot of the people who really need it get shut out because exactly they don't show up, and have they might have mental health issues, and they're very scared of that at some of these places because they, maybe they don't know how to respond. They don't have the people there to treat that kind of stuff, and they definitely don't want people who are actively using. They're terrified of that too. And in our town, those are the people that don't have a place to stay. Those are the people that are sleeping outside even when it's cold, and it's hardest for us to find them a place to sleep at night.
It is so hard, and it's funny when you talk to the regular community members. They're like, they always feel like those people come from somewhere else. Somebody brought those, somebody brought them and dropped them off.
Yeah, I've heard this before.
And talking to them like, no, these people are here.
Mm-hmm.
These people are our community members. What are we going to do for them? Because they're not going anywhere. There's no services for them.
Mm-hmm.
The services that are there, like you say, exclude them for whatever because of their past bad behavior or something like that. But they're still there. They're still living in the community. They're living in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
They're still drawing down on social resources, community resources, that if we would take a supportive stance, and an affirmative stance where we tried to help people instead, we could help solve some of that issue and save some of that cost on burden on society. But it's hard.
Yeah. You see that a lot. There's this impulse to kind of or talk about, people with substance use disorder or who are homeless or whatever as this sort of like, they're an outsider and they're out group and we're in group. Yeah. And it makes it so much easier to keep denying those people anything.
It does. It does.
And it's probably protective in some ways, They're like, we don't know those people, but I guarantee those people are your neighbors. You probably know that person's aunt or grandma or whoever it is, which always makes it easier to care for people in those positions.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
You're right. Not always.
Yeah, not always. I mean, you get some of those people, man, they're just so entrenched in that ideology, and then you get so much trauma within families, especially with substance use. It's just hard, and we, like I say, we deal with a lot of them too, and that's typically what we see coming through here. And I talk with our staff that they have to understand that the reason why we are working with those people was because they couldn't get help somewhere else already, so it's going to be harder. We're working with the more difficult people because the other people have already been served by the time they get done.
I see, yeah.
So we have to take that in mind and not take things so personally, because in reality, I view us and I try to instill in them that we are bridging gaps in services that other people either don't want to provide or can't provide, and that it's our job to really deal with those harder cases and to find something because there's nobody else below us that's going to help somebody.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I guess it's easy to forget, especially as a person in recovery, that a lot of times those people have like burned their families' lives to the ground too, which like I definitely did, like I ruined so many relationships while I was using, and it's hard to even think about those things now. But it's part of why it's easy to become punitive or, to try and lock those people out of certain services because they seem toxic, they seem dangerous, they've hurt a lot of people.
Yeah. I think for people, especially people in recovery, there's like a double-edged sword to it. There's the natural inclination of most of society to reject people going through those issues. But then there's also our own recovery. See, I have to be careful how much I'm around you because you might cause me to relapse, or you might cause me to start stumbling, and might cause me more issues down the road.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a double-edged thing that we have to always be cognizant and be aware of. And some people use that as a escape clause. Oh, I can't be around those kind of people because of my own recovery.
Yeah.
What we do here with peer recovery work, what people like yourself do through your ROSC, and by disclosing your lived experience with different things, you're able to connect with people in a different way, and on a different level. I know we've already gotten into this for a little bit, but why don't you take just a few minutes and kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do in the recovery community, and just kind of how you got here a little bit.
Sure. Do you want me to tell my name, everything?
Sure,
Hi,
yeah,
my name's Chris
I don't
Dennis.
think you mentioned your name yet. Sorry.
I was born in the fall. No, I'm just kidding.
It was a cool
It was
day.
early fall, the second son of an auto mechanic. I have been in recovery myself for almost 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. I was in active addiction for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I burned my whole life to the ground. I started working at the health department after I'd been in recovery for about a year, I guess.
Okay.
So
That's awesome.
now I coordinate a recovery-oriented system of care and an overdose prevention program. So for people who don't know, and most people don't, a recovery-oriented system of care there's a lot of them all over the state of Illinois now. Actually, other states have versions of this too. So it just is a way for a community to create all the other kind of support services that aren't direct treatment. So there are a lot of them. And the goal is to sort of find like key stakeholders in the community that provide a service or in some way or another interact with people with substance use disorder.
Right.
And all the things that happen after treatment that help a person stay in recovery and make recovery even possible, like housing, like food, like help navigating the judicial system, any of those things. The recovery-oriented system of care tries to help foster and build those, nurture those things that might already exist in the community, or help create things that aren't there, Like, I mean, one thing that our recovery-oriented system of care tries to do is involve sort of law enforcement, help them come and see what's happening, see what's available to them, because they're the ones that interact, of course, a lot with people with substance use disorder. So in that way, we're sort of like advocates for people with substance use disorder. And then there are other things like we don't have recovery housing in any of the counties that we serve. And so in that way, we're like trying to, find someone, like the ROSC won't create that itself, but we try to find someone who's in a position to do something like that, encourage them, tell them we need it, trying to convince them to put it in our area, things like that.
Advocate for
Yeah,
it, advocate
absolutely.
for that greater resource capacity.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
What type of key stakeholders you mentioned do you guys look for to partner with?
So we try to involve people from the faith-based community. That's something we didn't think about until I was, in the position for a while already. In that, when people are in trouble, a lot of times they go to the church, they go to, whatever religious organization they're like sort of closest to.
Right.
And so we want to sort of arm those people that go to those churches and are preach there or part of the congregation with good information, good evidence-based information about substance use disorder. Because, they do their best when someone comes and they're in trouble or they're addicted. But sometimes they don't know exactly what to do. Dealing with a person who is addicted is difficult and complicated. So we just want to make them feel like they know where the resources are in their town or their county, and what works best and, how you should be responding, what doesn't work, things like that.
What type of response do you feel like you've gotten from the faith-based, you guys see from the faith-based community around Harrisburg and Saline County?
It's been really good.
Is it?
It's been incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You guys have a really strong network over the faith-based groups. They're pretty on the go.
Yeah, they're in El Dorado, where our like sort of main office is, right?
Yeah.
There's 4,000 people live there, and there are 19 churches in that little town, So, and they they all know and love someone who's struggling with addiction.
Absolutely
So
they do.
every time we go to a church or someone comes in, everybody has a story, you know.
Yeah.
They're like, my niece was addicted to heroin. She lived with us for a couple months, you know. She stole everything that we had. They still love her. But I'm just saying, they all know. Like, it's in their town. It's been
Yeah.
happening in their town. And of course, some people, they still kind of come, you know, angry or confused about what to do, but
Sure.
it's been really positive, I think. So those are really, you know, important stakeholder. Getting sort of like judicial side to be more involved has been kind of hard, but there are other ROCs who are doing a great job of it, and I think we'll be able to, too, with just a little bit more work. A lot of those people, they already have a job
Yeah.
and they're already working very hard.
Yeah.
So to ask them to do this additional thing is sometimes a big ask for people.
It is. It's a big lift for a lot of people because here in our region there are so few people doing so many things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is.
I think that's been a challenge for us, but we're going to figure it out. And we just want to show them that, like, we're there to help them. So we're just trying to figure out sort of the best strategy, and without asking people to do more than, you know, what they're capable of doing, obviously.
Yeah, and I feel like I say, just there's so much need in our area and so few people doing anything. Like you say, people get spread thin, and then it becomes difficult engaging new leadership and fostering new leadership because sometimes it seems like younger generations from the outside looking in seem hesitant. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's older generations really kind of didn't allow younger generations to develop in leadership good. Um, I'm getting off track, but you mentioned developing with the justice system over in Saline County.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you guys have a drug court over there?
We don't, no.
Have you guys made any progress in
There's
developing one?
talk
Is it
a little
Yeah.
bit about possibly being a drug court at some point. I mean, it's the court system now is just like completely overwhelmed, you know.
Yeah, it is.
They're already sort of stressed under the weight of all the cases that they have, the majority of which are drug related.
Yeah.
And so it's like getting out from under the weight of that to try something new seems really, you know, like cumbersome, and
difficult.
it's difficult.
And the funding I don't know how the funding works with those things because, like the one that we work with in Jefferson County, I'm not sure how it's funded, but I've heard people tell me how the judge has pretty much had to fight and pioneer that thing herself
Yeah.
to get that pushed through. And then another county, I want to say over around Richland or somewhere. It's somewhere in the Second Circuit.
Yeah.
They just, I guess, basically just folded their drug court program because they couldn't
Yeah.
find funding for it.
The one county that we service, White County,
Yeah.
that had a drug court just ended theirs
That might be
for
what it is. It might
financial
be White
reasons.
County,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're really sad to hear that. The judge from that was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
He was always
Yeah, that's
showing
the
up to
same judge.
stuff.
Yeah, great guy. Great
He
guy.
wanted to tell everyone what a success the drug court was. And he'd been doing it quite a while. So, I mean, his message was like real and clear, and there was a lot of success. But it's, you know, financial stuff, you know. Hopefully that will change. And you and I are both probably seeing a lot of sort of financial sort of opportunities that didn't exist before in terms of the recovery, you know, treatment or community or whatever. And I hope
Rhetoric,
that,
anyway.
yeah, exactly. Hopefully that will change.
Yeah, so do
but-
you keep up much with, there was the big push last year with about the 10% set aside.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you keep up with any of that stuff, how any of that stuff shook out?
No, I mean, I kept going to those meetings for a
Yeah.
little while, and then it kept getting stalled and pushed back, and I sort of got confused.
So
about,
it's my understanding that the 10% set aside didn't make it into the federal budget.
I see.
But what they did was, so the goal was to be able to set aside 10% of the money that was allocated for substance use prevention and treatment.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was 10%, or 10% of that money would go to recovery services, and recovery support services.
Yeah.
So that didn't make it into it, but what they did was expand the language on the block grant to be prevention, treatment, and
Interesting.
recovery.
Okay.
So they were really fighting for that 10% set aside because, and you know this from grants, once things are on the books, it's hard to get them back off the books. So once you get that 10% set aside approved, that's 10% of that funding that's always going to be allocated to recovery support services. But at least it's in the language. So now it's just becoming more and more real, which we live, eat, and breathe recovery, so it's hard to imagine sometimes that recovery is really the new kid on the block in this area.
That's a good point.
And it's fun. It's neat. It makes me feel like I'm on the beginning of something. That's kind of cool.
I mean, and maybe it's because we're sort of down in that all the time thinking about recovery.
Yeah.
But I feel like 10% of like a person's sort of journey from active addiction in order to in a recovered life. I mean, it seems like it should be more than
it's
that.
so
You know,
disproportionate.
like direct treatment is a tiny little part of what happens whenever someone's trying to get better.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely. And they probably suck up the bulk of
And they
the bulk of
absolutely do.
funding.
Yeah.
I know prevention's a big thing. You know, but I could see where maybe 20% to prevention, maybe 20% to treatment. But yeah, definitely, because recovery is what carries us from the end of treatment forever.
Yeah, any period of abstinence or sort of change in the way that someone is using, like all of that afterwards is recovery,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And I think prevention, obviously, it makes so much sense that there's a lot of effort being put there. But it's, I mean, like a lot of things, we've seen probably in our lifetime the way that like sort of this like approach to prevention has changed over and over and no one has gotten it right yet. How do you prevent people from doing drugs? It's very strange.
Yeah. You've never been able to legislate morality. You know, so it's never going to work.
Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, I get it. It's a worthwhile cause. You know, that the ideal is that you cut the problem off before it develops. You know, so but the reality is it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
I think, and I could be biased, but a lot of the work that we do, you know, to support recovery or to change the way a community responds to addiction is also upstream stuff that keeps people from using drugs.
Absolutely.
I think, you know.
And I've heard somebody describe that as recovery is prevention. You know, and then that's true. And you think about it, you can't do treatment without recovery.
Yeah.
You know, because once you start getting better, you're in recovery. You know, but yeah, it does seem very disproportionate. It comes off kind of cocky sometimes, but I've told MAT providers that I'm like peer support is what makes your treatment program work. You know, because you have to have something for the rest of somebody's life. You can arrest the substance use in somebody's life and them still be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, all we've done is create an abstinent or sober, disaster. So we have to address, I know the big term nowadays is the social determinants of health.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's really cool. I love it. Getting into social work the last couple of years just really opens your eyes to how much more there is to helping people become healthy, whole, you know, or to meet that SAMHSA definition of, what is it? Health, home, community, and purpose. You know, there's a lot to that.
I mean, those are the things. And those systemic things are the hard problems. So it makes sense why, you know, governments and communities and organizations try to like do this sort of more direct approach to things like medication-assisted treatment, which obviously saves people's lives. And if you can stop a person's cravings, you know, it really will transform, you know, the way they think and feel. But it's just the very beginning, obviously. And all those systemic things are the reason that people can stay better or get better, I think.
Yeah, totally.
And peer work is at the heart of that, you know?
Absolutely. And there's so much of it at the heart of it too. I mean, peer support is important, but that community connection, feeling like you are connected to your community again, you know. I know we talk about it a lot on here and in our organization about how one of the first things that happen as we progress through our disease, whatever that be it substance use, homelessness, or incarceration, you know, we lose that connection with our community, with our family, with our jobs, all of these places. So restoring that. For a long time, I thought the number one thing that people needed was housing. You know, and I still do believe that's important. The big theory right now is pushing the housing first approach. You know, the rapid rehousing without without requiring people to be in recovery or seeking services.
Yeah.
You know, I totally lost my train of thought.
No, I know what you mean. Like just giving someone, no matter what situation they're going through,
Yeah.
whether they're still using drugs, they have a place to live. Like,
Absolutely. So, okay, I know what I was thinking now.
yeah.
But I've also learned how important having a good job is really just as important as that housing component. Because even if we put people in a house, for one thing, especially a job where you have a living wage, where you're getting a good living, gives us so much purpose, and identity, and positive meaning, positive connection. But it just, man, it comes down to having money. You have to have money in this world, and when you're trying to recover and you have no resources, you have no job or a lousy job. We have a guy staying in our warming center that's been in recovery a few months, homeless, has a job, full-time job,
Wow,
is
yeah.
homeless, staying in a warming center at night. Now,
Yeah.
how is somebody going to sustain recovery like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That seems like really tenuous. Anything could happen. I was homeless for probably 2 years,
Yeah.
and I was being arrested all the time during
Yeah.
that. And every time I got out of jail, I thought, I'm going to stop using, I'm going to get clean. But it was so hard to find a place to go. And I think the only reason I ever ended up, fully entering recovery is because there were some friends of our family that let me come and stay at their house.
Yeah.
They took a huge risk, and not everybody has that.
Yeah.
Or someone who's willing to take such, we're going to let this person who's been arrested 5 times, who's injecting meth and heroin every day, come. They've been clean for a few months because they've been in jail. We're going to let them come and live at our house. I mean, I'm sure they were terrified, but they let me do it, and it is absolutely the reason that I was able to get clean.
How did you? So were these people that you knew beforehand?
Yeah.
Did they know you?
Yeah.
So I mean, like you say, that's a pretty big chance to take on somebody.
It really was. And in a lot of ways, I was really privileged in that, like, before I started using drugs, I had gotten a master's degree. I'd been working.
Okay.
A lot of people aren't at that point in their life. Like, I fell off when I had done some things, luckily.
Okay.
And so they knew me as another person before that who wasn't, sort of a meth-ravaged crazy
So
person.
about what age did you really fall into addiction and fall into that sort of downward spiral?
I was in my mid-30s.
Okay.
Yeah. I had, when I was in college as a younger person, I had started taking prescription pain pills.
Yeah.
And that lasted for about a year, and I just really, without even realizing what was happening, I kind of went off the deep end.
Yeah.
But it was only a year. I had a lot of people around me to be helpful. And I stopped using it. And I was clean for about a decade after that. I didn't drink or anything.
Yeah.
I went to grad school, and I was living in St. Louis. And then I moved back to Southern Illinois, and it was rough. I couldn't find a job. Things got weird. I started to isolate, and stayed isolated for quite a while, and then started taking pills again, And it was like 6 months after that time, I was shooting heroin and meth, and it was access. When I was in grad school and living in St. Louis, I didn't know anybody who did heroin. I didn't know anybody that had methamphetamines. And I came back home, and the neighbor has, there's lots of drugs everywhere. And I know there are drugs in the city too, but I just wasn't around them. So I was in a bad place, and I knew lots of people that had drugs, and it was very easy to just start using them.
Absolutely.
And within a year of that, I had nowhere to live. I mean, I was sleeping behind buildings and sleeping in abandoned garages or whatever it was. But people had known me before. They tried to stay in touch as often as, I could get in touch with anybody.
Yeah. Sometimes our behavior doesn't allow it.
And they were all, sort of disturbed and angry, and I had, like, stolen lots of money from my family and done terrible things. And for those people, it took longer for me to rebuild that trust. But there were some other people that cared about me that I hadn't done anything terrible to, who was like, you can come and live with us, we'll take this chance. And it changed my life, it made everything possible.
I don't think my disease spared anybody around me. I think I pretty much stole.
Yeah, from everyone, yeah.
I even stole from people that weren't around me.
Well, I hadn't had an opportunity to steal from them while using, so that's probably why.
Yeah, and those familial relationships are so difficult. I feel like I've learned the hard way that, I mean, some bridges never get rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate, but like there are people in my life. So my story was a little bit different because I started so young,
Mm-hmm.
but it also allowed me to burn out so much younger and get started on a new life in my mid 20s. I went to, I started recovery going to Teen Challenge and I was 23. Um, so I was in my mid 20s and have been able to build the rest of my life since then. So I'll be 47 in a few months. So I have been in recovery longer than I was, before
Mm-hmm.
recovery.
Incredible, yeah.
So that was a benefit of, I mean, what it man, it was a horribly miserable existence growing up in the juvenile justice system and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. But now I see where it's kind of an advantage because I didn't have to repair carnage in my older adult life.
Yeah.
Like I see so many people coming
Mm-hmm.
from that don't get into recovery until their midlife, or don't get into active addiction until their midlife, and then
Mm-hmm.
have several really bad years and then try to come out of it. I've been able to build a whole new life since then.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah, when you're a full-grown adult and you're making those kind of decisions, it's harder to get people to forgive you,
It is. Yeah.
That's true.
It absolutely is. People are hard, man. Forgiveness is hard for people.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you've sort of taught them to not trust you,
Yeah.
to worry whenever you're at their house, to think that you could be dead at any time,
Yeah.
and then it doesn't really matter to you,
Yeah.
So it's such a hard
Man,
thing to
I
learn to
would give
navigate.
my grandmother a hug and have my hand in her pocketbook.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Same.
So I totally get it that
Yeah.
some of those relationships never came back.
Mhm.
I regret it. I regret so many things about when I was younger. But man, I've been able to experience such a beautiful life since then. It's been amazing to see where my life has gone since I got into recovery. Way beyond anything I could imagine. I remember in the worst of my addiction, I used to just cry myself to sleep sometimes, just want to be normal. I remember just praying to God, I just want to be normal. I just want to be normal. And now I got that normal life,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little too normal and it's just boring, but it's great seeing the healing process personally. And then I kind of frame it like this, that I really feel like I spent probably about 18 years healing from my addiction, really up until about 4 or 5 years ago, when I kind of just before I enrolled in school. And since that point, things have sped up really fast, but it seems like I'm starting to finally reclaim the potential that I had all the time if my youth hadn't been stolen from me through addiction. So, and that's a good thing. What do you think really helps support you and keep you strong in your recovery now?
It's an interesting question. Thinking about, you started using when you were pretty young, right?
So this is kind of an interesting thing about it. So believe it or not, the justice system actually protected me a little bit because I stayed locked up so much I couldn't get into drugs. I smoked maybe a dime bag worth of grass or something before I started getting in trouble.
Yeah.
But from 15 to 18, I was literally locked up all the time.
Wow.
Except for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, one time I sat in YDC, which is Youth Detention Center, for 5 months, and then went to an 18-month juvenile treatment program.
Mm-hmm.
And then come out of that. So I didn't do a lot of drugs younger, but once I come out of that, I was able to walk the straight and narrow for about 4 months is all it got me.
I see,
And
yeah.
then the addiction came in. I started drinking with my friends, and then it was like full-blown alcoholism. Full-blown drug addiction really kind of enveloped me pretty fast. There was no slow in or anything. It was just like...
Wow. Well, I mean, you'd spent your formative years locked up, so
And that's what I tell people. I felt like I got a lot of mental, oh my gosh, psychodynamic theory was so big in the 80s.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
Well, it's a lot of just a lot of Freudian stuff and a lot of anyway, it's a rabbit hole. But
well, I asked
got
because
a lot of that stuff, but I didn't have any life skills.
Yeah,
no
that
life
makes
skills
sense,
whatsoever because I spent all that time locked up. And then growing up in those type of environments where you're living with a bunch of other people and stuff, it's a weird way to grow up.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Well, I asked because I was thinking, from the first time I tried any drug, like, which I was probably like 12 or 13 years old, and we
so
lived
that's
in
young.
poverty pretty much, and and my parents, they had to work a lot. It was a sort of pretty free life as a kid. But even from the first time I tried, anything, marijuana, cocaine, whatever it was, I craved drugs always after that. I mean, I just wanted to find some way to change my consciousness every day, at every moment,
Right.
And the periods of abstinence I had, always at the beginning, were really difficult. So, I could tell, especially, that sort of first bout with prescription pain medication, because that was like a real addiction. There were real withdrawals after that. Is when I got a real sense of like what was possible in terms of like consuming drugs. Like I wasn't going to stop unless something terrible happened, because it was changing the way that I felt in such like a profound, important way. And to answer your initial question about finding a way to stay in recovery, it's like learning to sort of remember that if I look for some way to sort of change the way that I'm feeling at any given moment, there's no telling what could happen. So I have to like find a better way to do that.
So how do you
Just so hard to do.
Yeah. So how do you do that nowadays?
I don't know. What do I do? That's such a hard question. Like, I mean, my cravings are, I've been sober 4 years now, so they're very like calm, and they rarely happen. And I think sort of being in touch with my emotions has been one of the hardest things for me to do. I feel like that was the thing.
You feel a lot more emotionally free today than.
I feel more in touch with the way that I'm feeling. I sort of pay attention to the way that I'm feeling in a way I didn't before. Because when you get in that habit of like, if you're feeling sort of any kind of discomfort, and you find some way to alleviate that from yourself, that's so addictive.
Okay.
And I think paying attention to my feelings now, which sounds so wooey, but it's like absolutely the reason that I stay clean, is that I can feel them and just like let them happen and pay attention to them and like respond to other people's emotions in a way that I wasn't able to do before.
Have you ever read Emotional Intelligence 2.0?
No, I haven't.
Really
No.
great book. Strongly encourage you to read it. Audiobook. I love audiobooks.
Yeah, I do too. Yes. Yeah.
In a few hours. But it just taught you. So emotional intelligence is learning how to manage yours and other people's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what. So it actually takes that and applies it to almost like a business or professional setting. How to utilize emotional intelligence to have for your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
How to like say manage your emotions in those times, being mindful, how to control yourself when you get upset, and then also how to control other people, not in like a manipulative type of sense, but how you can just kind of sort of work around people's emotions and kind of achieve more positive outcomes. Obviously manipulation would be similar to that.
Yeah.
I'm finding that there's always two sides to every coin. One side is like one side's like the sick side, and the other side's like the positive, healthy side. We talk about that all the time. We're like, which we call it, especially like with motivational interviewing, we're like, what's the difference between this and manipulation?
Yeah, I feel like it's a fine line with most things that are important anyway.
And like you're talking about seeking that consciousness change. So I do a lot of meditation. I feel like I do a lot of it. I feel like I'm doing more and more of it. Not like sit on the floor with my legs crossed, listening to the little Tibetan bowls.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Although I do listen to
Yeah,
videos
it's nice sometimes. I agree.
Some days, man, I might spend an hour and a half meditating. It is in a way to seek that consciousness change.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not the same type of consciousness change as when I get high.
Of course,
it's to help control. It is to help control my internal emotions by, for one, identifying them, actually dealing with them.
I mean, it's like a way to connect with yourself.
It is.
Which is, I think, the whole thing about recovery, and probably why I'm able to do it now, is that I feel so connected to my community now. That's awesome. I go out and talk to people, and I feel like they care about me and I care about them. And that was something that did not happen when I was using, I was completely disconnected.
Now, before when you were now, what was your career before you got into active addiction?
I was a college instructor.
You were a college instructor. I know you said you did some journalism and some writing and
yeah.
You were an actual college instructor. Where at?
I taught a lot of places.
Did you?
But
I never knew that.
So after I got my master's in writing, I taught at WashU for a little while.
Okay.
I taught at Brown Mackie College in St.
Okay.
Louis. I taught at SIU. I taught at Johnny
Really?
Logan. I taught at SIC. Every time I'd move, that's what I did. I loved doing it. It's a lot of work, but it was really great. I just think, in this time now that I've been in recovery or sober, or whatever you want to say, it's like having to sort of learn how to stay connected to people and pay attention to people in a really healthy way. And that's something I just struggled with before.
Yes.
That was like always difficult, and I could never find the right way to do it,
Yeah. I deal with a lot of distorted thought patterns, namely around paranoia, especially around other people, that causes me to feel alienated when I'm not alienated. And I know a lot of people feel that.
Yeah.
But for me, sometimes it causes, even in a space where I know everybody is there, appreciates me and wants me in that space, sometimes I feel like I'm I'm not wanted there,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
feel that. And so being able to control that in moments, especially in coalition building moments,
Yeah.
where you're in a lot of rooms, you have to be in touch with yourself.
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of anxiety, not the kind of anxiety where I end up in a corner sweating and I can't move, that type of anxiety, but especially being in spaces that I'm not used to, one of the things that I talk about that I actually have a fear about this as I grow as an advocate is that I'm going to have to go to Chicago at some point. And I have this huge fear of these huge urban areas.
Wild.
Because
Yeah.
and it's not like I'm afraid of crime or anything like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I am more afraid of trying to find a parking spot.
Wild. I don't think that's uncommon, honestly. But interesting.
I went to SIU over in Carbondale to meet some of our administrators for the CRSS program we work with. I drove around for about 10 minutes and my anxiety was off the chart because I couldn't find a parking space where I wasn't afraid I would get towed.
Yeah.
I turned around and came home.
No.
I was getting text messages, hey, are you coming by the office? And I'm like, no, something came up. No, what came up was I couldn't find a parking spot and I got weirded out.
Oh my God. You're like, this has got to end. I have to leave. Huh.
So
interesting.
But the more recovery grows, the more people like you and I are in leadership positions in that movement, the more we're called on to be in larger spaces. And so I have this anxiety that I'm going to have to go to Chicago.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to, there's also a lot of insecurity where I view myself as not on the same level as other advocates up there too.
Oh, same. Me too.
So meditation helps me out with a lot of that. I do a lot of mindfulness, trying to find out what's going on in my body. I don't acknowledge stress very well. Like we just did these fiscal audits. We went through a very difficult funding period. If you ask me any day, oh yeah, I'm doing okay. Yeah, I'm a little stressed, but it's okay right now. And so I spent a lot of time over the last few months really trying to seek inside, am I experiencing the stress? Because I know that I am. And there's still some parts of me that are closed off because I could never really find that stress that has to be there. It's just got to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm still
sort of
trying
get
to
used to it,
myself.
Yeah. And I think we're around the same age, and this isn't all of it, but we're sort of from a generation, and I think this is especially, the case for young boys, is that people weren't really teaching their kids to feel what they're feeling and pay attention to other people and what's going on in their body. Especially if you grow up in poverty, it's get control of yourself, control the way that you're feeling. We have to do this, and you get used to sort of doing that and don't know how, as an adult, to pay attention to those things and be responsive emotionally to other men or whatever it is. And it's a hard lesson to learn once you're an adult, You've already been wired a little bit.
Yeah, it's like you spend those formative years learning to deny, don't cry, don't let people see your weakness, I'll give you something to cry about, all these really weird things. And then we become adults and we have to get into relationships with other people where we have to be vulnerable and we can't do it. It's, I feel like as men, those are some things that we're starting to finally identify and hopefully starting to work towards, alleviating. I feel like we run into so many problems in adulthood because of, I think we all recognize that with ACEs and stuff because of issues that happened as kids that we never dealt with, and then carry those patterns into our adulthood and end up forming a lot of pathologies because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Seems
You know,
true.
we need a generation of in touch.
Yeah, we really do. Yeah.
Whatever you wanna be,
All of it.
you know, and
That's it, right.
it's a tough spot, especially with so much social media and people are, you know, there's a lot of talk about people, younger generations feeling more isolated now than they ever
I
have
know, I hear that all the
because
time.
of social media and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So, and it's kind of a weird thing because that stuff's supposed to connect us.
And I think it probably does for a lot of people. You know, like, there are young people. I mean, I grew up gay in a small town,
Yeah.
and there was nobody, like, around that, like, I thought looked like me or
Right,
felt
I
like
bet you
me.
did, yeah.
And I felt so isolated, and I was around a lot of people. And, of course, they weren't always very kind about that either, because I was kind of, like, feminine as a kid. So people hated that, too. But now... Well, like you were saying, there's like a dark side and a good side to it. Because for a lot of people, like, you know, the internet and media has provided a way for them to see other people like them and encounter ideas they would never have access to 40 years ago in a little town like ours. They wouldn't even know that stuff existed. And then also, it's like a sort of illusion of community and that you're not really around another person. You know, you're not looking somebody in the eyes and they're not responding to your feelings in any sort of real intuitive way. So it's like so tricky. I don't know how.
Tricky.
I feel like raising a young kid right now must be so hard. Like, what, you don't know. You have to sort of balance that out depending on what they need.
Yeah, I got 2 kids. It's tricky. I got really good kids.
Yeah.
I know some people have a lot more of a challenge than what I have.
That's nice.
Kids weren't a challenge.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, man, I got blessed.
that's nice.
You cannot imagine, maybe you can, the anxiety of growing up. Or not growing up, but going through watching my kids grow up, just waiting for that day. For me, it was waiting for them to become 14 to see those behaviors start manifesting. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know? But there was a lot of anxiety. There is past sexual trauma in my past. You know, making sure that stuff didn't get passed down to the next generation was a huge fear of mine. You know, that didn't happen. You know, so it didn't seem like it was that hard, but I felt like I had really good kids.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like those things weren't an issue, but we gave them a lot of freedom, like especially in social media. And I know a lot of parents really struggle with social media with their kids. And then of course we see a lot of, and it gets hyped up a lot, the negative ramifications, you know, especially with the, you know, increased suicides and stuff like that amongst young people. It's just a really weird environment. But the thing about it is we look at it from our growing up without that stuff. You know, for the young people, it might be different because they've always grown up with it.
Yeah, it seems so kind of crazy to us, you know, that they'd spend all their time doing that. I mean, I'm getting used to it. My son is 22 years old now, and so he sort of happened, you know, he was really young at a time where there wasn't, you know, he didn't have a smartphone necessarily, and the internet wasn't that great, you know, so we spent a little time on there.
And if you think about it like that, like I say, my daughter's about to turn 21. No, I think she's just turned 20. She's just turned 20. My son's about to turn 16 on the 1st. So maybe younger kids and younger than that, it might be even more challenging.
Well, I think so, you know.
My kids are a little bit older. Now when I say I'm raising kids, my kids aren't exactly kids.
Well, I just think now the technology is so intuitive and so easy to use and just like responds to you in this weird, you know, it seemed unfathomable 20 years ago that your phone would, you know, just like let you know all these things about yourself and sort of you're giving your phone or your Apple Watch or whatever you're using sort of biofeedback all the time, you know. It's crazy. So it must be harder for those little kids who, like, you know, an iPad or whatever, they just know how to use it. It makes so much sense to them. It's just like part of their life constantly, And to us, that seems like science fiction, you know, or would have.
Yeah, well, I remember as a kid having the phone with the really, really, really long cord that you could.
Oh yeah, same. Yeah. You wanted any privacy, you had to add another cord to it.
Absolutely, a dial-up internet. You know, oh my gosh, that was horrible. You'd wait like 15 minutes for like half an image to download.
Yes, but we do it. I did it all the time, just sitting there for an hour. It was like, pretty soon this picture is going to load.
I grew up in South Georgia, which is a lot like Southern Illinois. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to the things that I was into. I was always skateboard, punk music, a lot of alternative music. So
Mm-hmm.
what's funny is I laugh at some of my friends because there's so much of the anti-transgender movement with people cross-dressing and stuff, and I was like, I remember being 19 or 20 years old into grunge and us wearing dresses
Yes,
and putting
yeah.
on lipstick and eyeshadow, but we were punks.
Yeah,
We
for
were,
sure. Mm-hmm.
but so I was a little different growing up, even with that. Of course, I got in a lot of trouble too, but there were things that I was into. Like I was always into sci-fi and fantasy, and
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't find that stuff where I was at. So you get on the internet finally, and you can look
Yes,
up all that cool
right?
stuff
Yeah.
and read cool stories
Uh-huh.
and stuff. And nowadays, that stuff is just like,
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy. Do you ever do anything with the new virtual reality stuff?
No, I don't. And I know very little about it, but I know lots of other people that do.
Yeah, I've never played with it or anything, but it's supposed to be getting very realistic and
Mm-hmm.
very good. It's crazy how far we're coming. Have you ever seen the movie Ready Player One,
Yeah, I've
where
seen
the
it.
people are like escaping from their life
Yes.
into these video
Mm-hmm.
games? Do you think that might become a reality one day, or
I think it's happening already. I really
it
do.
seems like it's on
Yeah.
a level?
I mean, there are people who spend so much time, and it's like a whole other world in there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it seems hard for probably someone who didn't grow up with it. Like you didn't have that when we were formative or toddlers, but
Sure.
I think so. I mean, people will spend all day just sort of immersed in whatever it is, a video
Absolutely.
game, or it's
And
probably happening now.
yeah. Well, do you know anything about Neuralink?
Uh-uh.
So that's one of Elon Musk's things where they actually
Okay.
embed the chip inside your brain.
Oh, I see.
And
How does that work?
well, they're supposed to be able to run the electrodes down into your brain. I'm not sure exactly what it does right
Uh-huh,
now.
uh-huh.
But it's that next step to where now we're actually embedding technology into our body.
Wow,
Well, I guess
yeah.
we've been doing that to some degree.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a pacemaker, I
But
guess.
smart technology that
Yeah.
might be able to
I see.
communicate with other people and stuff.
I see, yeah.
And I mean, who knows? We could be a generation away from, us
Mhm.
being able to talk to each other. We always
Yeah.
thought it'd be like some psychopathic ability or
Yeah,
telepathic ability or
uh-huh.
something, but maybe it's just
Really.
going to be Wi-Fi.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't even have to connect anything to a person's brain. You literally can get all that sort of information and give it to someone through a watch or through, holding the screen up or whatever it
Yeah,
is, through the same
absolutely.
experience.
Absolutely. It's just amazing how much that stuff has just become a part of our life, you know. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where things go. I know I plan on living another 40 years probably.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no telling where we'll be at in another couple decades, another 4 decades. There's no telling.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say one time that if you can survive the next 20 years, medical technology will have advanced enough to keep you around for another 20 years. And
Incredible.
then if you can make it through the next 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
medical technology will be at a place where it can keep you alive forever.
I hope so.
You
I'd
think so?
love
Would
to
you like
live
to live
forever.
forever?
Sure, why not? Actually sounds miserable, but I'll do it.
I know, right?
I've done worse.
It's just
So.
so, well, when you think about all the like vampire movies you watch where people live forever, you acquire this mass amount of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I could really burn a couple lives
Mhm.
forever. That'd be my biggest fear. It's like now, not only do I have to battle recovery for the rest of my, 40
Oh,
years,
that's
now I got to
true.
battle my recovery the next
Oh,
1,000
that's
million
grim. You're
years.
absolutely right. Probably not worth it.
Well, Chris, it's been really great talking
Thanks
to
for
you,
having me.
learning more about you. Is there anything, you guys got anything big coming up with your ROSC? It'll be a few weeks for this will get published, but, anything a couple months down the road that you guys
Well,
got going on?
We're still having some more laundry events, so we love doing people's laundry for free.
That's awesome.
That's exciting. We're gonna try to spend
That's
this
really good
year.
service that
Yeah.
people don't think about.
It's been so great to do. Like they just show up with all their dirty laundry and hang out with us, and we get to talk to them about whatever kind of services are available in the area.
That's awesome.
So that's cool. We really want to spend this year focusing on multiple pathways to recovery and just trying to sort of educate our community about the broad ways there are to get recovery. We feel like a lot of people have kind of a narrow concept of
Yes.
what you have to do to get
lot,
better.
yeah.
And there's just like a ton of ways to do it. And I feel like it opens it up and makes it easier to conceive. So we really want to let people know about that. We're going to spend a year focusing on it.
Absolutely. Do you participate in our CERN group?
Yeah.
The Southern Illinois
Yes,
Recovery
sure do.
Network.
Every month. I can't believe you had to ask.
One of the things that one of the things that I think we're going to talk about in our next meeting is putting together some type of conference or convention or something in our region for recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that like something that highlights, which problem is we don't have a lot of pathways in Southern Illinois, but if we can expose people to that, so if we can have like a conference that would have, I'd like to do a lot of different things,
Mm-hmm.
but having multiple pathways on display for people to see,
Mm-hmm.
because like if you never see anything different, you can't imagine what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But so being able to bring, I know one of the things that we're trying to do more, we're really exploring some more smart recovery. I know there's been a lot of talks about getting that started, but just showing people that there's more. Well, for one thing, there's more than just abstinence.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing, there's more than just AA and NA. There's more than Celebrate Recovery. There's also more than medically assisted recovery.
Yeah.
There's all different kinds of things in between, whether it can be, man, a buddy of mine in one of our other RCOs up north has started these new, I'm sure he is the one starting it, but affinity groups, people that have something in common other than just recovery.
Nice.
But people that like to paint. So you would get a group of people together to paint, not necessarily to talk about recovery, but if you do, that's great. But the idea is to spend time connecting in a community painting.
Yeah.
Or for somebody like myself that loves to go hiking in the Shawnee, it'd be a group of people that would just go and hike.
I love that.
It's not sitting down for a circular meeting in a room where we're going to confront some awkward hidden secret, which is great.
Yeah, that works for a lot of people.
We don't want to do that every meeting for the rest of our lives.
There are lots of other ways for people to nurture each other, that aren't just about talking about drugs or talking about addiction specifically.
And I feel like that's one of the things that I try to talk to people about a lot. That one, in my life, you could have removed the drugs and I would have been an absolute disaster. And two, that there's so much more to it than just the substance use. And that when we just focus on the substance use, we're only fixing a small part of the problem. We have to start seeing the whole person, and we have to start addressing the whole person. And that includes the family, the community, and the larger systems that serve us. We have to affect all that stuff.
Yeah.
But Chris, man, I got a lot of respect for you, bro.
Thank you.
I really appreciate what you've done in that position.
I appreciate
know that we've
that.
always had a great relationship with SI support. I don't think that I would be sitting in this chair or where I'm at if it hadn't been for the support of your predecessor. Just embracing me and almost just encouraging me.
Yeah,
I think maybe for lack of
he was
anything else,
obsessed with
maybe
you.
for lack of anything else to talk about.
No, it was
but
wonderful.
It was what I needed to encourage me, and it really kind of helped. But to see you come in and take over that and really push things to the next level has been great. I enjoy working with you.
Thank you.
In all the various capacities that we work in. And man, I just really appreciate you coming in and sitting
Thanks for
down
having
with
me. This is very cool.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
it. Well, that's it, man.
All right.
See, you survived.
Sounds great. Oh, I didn't get to tell you about the Cave of the Black